everyone. My name is Camila, and I'm the creator of Let's Talk Miami, where we're pulling back the curtains on our local political environment. And we're talking to key stakeholders on how to best solve some of our local issues. And today we're talking about public transportation with an organization that I think is super cool, Transit Alliance, who is a nonprofit that is working towards making our community more prosperous and more equitable through mobility. So without further ado, let's get started. Today we have Maria Cristina Chicuen, who is actually a local raised in Kendall and is passionate about transportation and how we move Miami forward. She's currently the public affairs manager for Transit Alliance. So Maria, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
How are you?
I'm doing well. It's a very exciting time right before Thanksgiving. And, I'm always excited to talk about our local politics and, just help your listeners learn a little bit more about what's happening on the transit and mobility side. So just really, really happy that you reached out and invited us.
Yeah, and you guys just released a new campaign called the 100 Days of Cava. So we're going to do a deep dive onto that plan. But before we do you mind giving us an introduction on who Transit Alliance is and what your role is about?
Of course. So Transit Alliance is a local nonprofit, and our mission is to improve public transit, make our streets more bikeable and really walkable. And one of the ways that we are achieving that is through, grassroots organizing. And making sure that residents, especially transit riders, have a better system that they can rely on. One of our most recent and I guess most popular campaigns has been the Better Bus Project, and that is the first bus system redesign that was led by a nonprofit. In the entire United States, because this is usually a project, right, that transit departments take on, but we have a great team of really passionate leaders who realized that there was a problem and did something about it. A variety of different campaigns, but our most recent one is the Cava Plan, which I'm really excited to talk to you all about.
In the Cava Plan, you actually have a part on the Better Bus Network. So do you want to just dive right into that first part, which is having our newly elected mayor, Daniela Levin Cava, commit to implementing the Better Bus Network. So can you explain to our listeners that are kind of new to Transit Alliance, what is the Better Bus Network?
Absolutely. So, to really explain what the Better Bus Network is, we have to go back, like a year and a half ago to when this project really got started. And then Commissioner Cava was a huge supporter of, redesigning the bus network. So after a year and a half of, doing workshops at, libraries across the county, created this plan called the Better Bus Network that improves the frequency, the reliability, and the overall connectivity of the bus network. And I think it's really, it's really important for, for your listeners to understand that the bus is really the workhorse of our transit system.
Yes.
It's not the metro rail, it's not the trolleys, it is the bus. About 60% of our riders on transit utilize the bus to get to where they need to go. But our system had not been redesigned in about 30 years. So imagine trying to get to where you need to go for a system that was designed 30 years ago. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I have seen that. 1986 was the last time that our bus system was redesigned. That's crazy.
Yeah, no. And the more that you think about it, you're like, even within the last 2 years, the places that you used to travel to may not even be there anymore. And just imagine if you're utilizing, a bus that is taking routes that maybe no longer serve you. So we really realized that, redesigning the bus system to, just improve like how seamless the routes are was crucial. But on top of that, if you are waiting on a bus that only comes once every hour, that's not a bus that really serves most people, especially working people. And so with the Better Bus Network, we really focus on seeing how we can, not just improve your commute in terms of the frequency, when every bus arrives, but really making sure that it works for the people who don't have traditional schedules, right? So think about folks who work at like hotels or who work in restaurants. These aren't your typical like 9 to 5 commuters. These are people that maybe have a shift that starts at noon or that starts at 6 p.m. and they need a bus that works for them all day, right? Not just during what we call the peak hours, right? When there's like the most traffic and when everyone is like hustling and bustling. And so with the Better Bus Network, after we went through a very intense community engagement process, we worked with a team of consultants that created the final plan. And just this past October, the Board of County Commissioners at the county level, I should say, they accepted the recommendations that we presented to them. And so going back to the CAVA plan, the first, I guess, pillar, which is the C, is that we want now our Mayor Levine Cava to commit to actually implementing the recommendations in 2021. And that's something that it's not so simple, because there's a very important public hearing that needs to happen before any routes change. So essentially what that means is that, we presented the recommendations, but now the board has to take this back to the community and say, we're going to change this route here and we're going to change this route there. What do you guys think? And the reason they do that is to make sure that people aren't caught off guard and that everybody has a say in the process.
Got it. So when you say that the board of the county commissioners accepted the recommendation, it's just like we acknowledge it. Is that basically what that is?
Right. So they accepted the first phase of the project, which was, presenting a report with the recommendations. And that was really, this is a multi-phase project essentially, because it's like, when you're doing like a research project, you do all the research and then you present it, right? And the second step is like, okay, so what are we going to do with this? And something that I think has really, affected our transportation system for decades is that we do a lot of studies, but we fall short in implementing what we learned, right? And what we're trying to do is make sure that, look, we just spent a very, intense year and a half, creating this network. Now is a time for the commission with, the leadership of the mayor to implement the recommendation.
So can you explain to us what role the mayor would have in implementing the Better Bus Network?
Sure. So, because, within the county, our mayor plays an indispensable role. And I'm not sure how much your listeners know about, other municipalities, but our mayor really has a strong say in setting the vision for what each department wants. As I'm sure some people have been seeing, she is like reorganizing the county to have, instead of deputy mayors, to have like operating officers for like, different departments. And they're like new leadership roles. So she can really set the vision and give direction to the department to carry the plan out and launch the public hearing. Because we really need her to kind of say, all right, Department of Transportation and Public Works, we really need this to happen this year. And because, they do respond to her leadership, she's integral to this process. And I have to say that, when we launched the project, I some people have asked me like, oh, so did you guys, come up with the CAVA like plan and then like filled it in with your priorities? And I was like, no, like these were things that we already wanted to achieve. It just so happened that they worked out, with her name. And she's very excited. Yeah, she's very excited about the plan, and she's been very supportive.
Yeah, I did see that today. There was a new article on the Miami New Times where she said she's committed to this plan. So it's actually pretty great news. So
yeah, it's excellent.
Yeah, so let's move on to the second part of that plan, which is to adopt the dedicated bus lanes to supplement that Better Bus Network, which is basically saying we're gonna have in our roads a dedicated bus lane. So my question to you is, for people like me that drive a lot, you're telling me that our roads are gonna get smaller, we're gonna have less lanes? Is that what you guys are saying?
No, well, so I think that is a common misconception, when people hear like, you're going to throw a bus lane in the middle of our roadways? Not necessarily. So I think there are two different distinctions, right? So in South Dade, we recently received money, right, to implement what's called a BRT system. So that's a bus rapid transit system. And on US 1, there's like a busway that already has like its like own dedicated space, and it spans like a solid stretch from like Dadeland to like Florida City. That's a BRT. A dedicated bus lane is meant to help buses that are congested at specific points on a corridor move faster. So we're not taking away like an entire stretch of like a street of Flagler. We're not taking like a whole lane of Biscayne Boulevard. It's really making sure that buses don't get stuck in traffic in very dense areas, right? Because, for example, let's say you're a bus rider, and you have to go, from downtown to FIU. You don't want to get stuck in traffic, right? Just like the other cars do. And this is something that not only is it going to help the buses move faster, but it's really going to show people that may be stuck in their cars that, hey, like maybe I can just hop on a bus and get to where I need to go because I might get there faster. And that's something that we see as really beneficial, not just for people's commutes, but really think about, this is like a climate issue. Because if your buses are moving faster, that means that they're not, stuck there like pumping out, toxic fumes. It's really going to help a lot of like students. It's going to help workers because we're helping our transit system just move, right? Like we're no longer just stuck in the same place, which is I think something that a lot of car commuters feel, right? Like the solution to traffic is not expanding our roads, right? It's figuring out how we can move people more efficiently through mass transit.
So help me paint the picture for our listeners. So you're on Biscayne Boulevard, which I believe has 3 lanes, right?
Yeah, it has. I mean, it's a very big, but I think like going like north, there's like 3 to 4 lanes.
Three or 4 lanes. Okay, so you're saying that one of those lanes is going to be dedicated to the bus, but it's not that it's just for the bus. You're going to have people riding on that lane, or is that lane just not going to be used at all?
It would be like specific segments. So let's say that you need to get from like the Adrian Arch Center to like a further stretch, like let's say to like Midtown. Like there could be like a mile of the lane itself that gets painted specifically for the bus. And so the bus would have the ability to just utilize that like unobstructed. But then maybe like once you get to Midtown, like it just becomes like a regular thoroughfare with other cars. But this is actually something that we already have now in downtown. It's just not utilized because it's not enforced, right? So when you're leaving Government Center and heading east, so basically as if you're heading to like Bayside, there is a dedicated bus lane. But right now, like cars get into it, like anybody can get into it. And so the bus doesn't necessarily, have the right of way, but it's something that could be very powerful. And it's a very like cost efficient way of moving people like more quickly, right? Like think about it, like building a train can cost you like billions of dollars, right? And even like a BRT project is fairly expensive depending on how long it is. Right. But a dedicated bus lane, you could just like get a couple of cones and just test it, and it could be relatively inexpensive. But even if you want to actually paint it out, like it could cost you somewhere between like $60 million like per mile, which in a county that has like a $9 billion budget, it's like a drop in the bucket.
So that's an interesting solution. I guess it's using what we already have, instead of adding more cost to us, and truly having it's gonna show that you're gonna have more traffic because you are cutting off parts of the lane. But like you said, if you're in the car and you're seeing this bus move, you're gonna rethink twice. Like, hey, maybe now I can actually take the bus. It becomes something, because honestly, sometimes we're in the car and we're going faster than the bus.
Right.
Like, why would I do that? So I mean, if you're seeing the bus move faster, more people are gonna be willing to, or at least consider it. Like maybe I should
Exactly.
taking the bus.
Exactly. And I think that this is something really important too, when especially, we're redesigning the entire bus network, right? Like the time to be, innovative and experimental is now, because, we're dealing with like a new system. And that's why we strongly encourage the department to really, to really go forth and do this, because, there could only be good things that happen, because it's going to show, how much potential our bus system truly has.
Right. And so the idea is to first start off in Biscayne Boulevard and Flagler, right?
So those are the two corridors that we are proposing, because right now, with the Better Bus Network, the Flagler corridor would have, it's going to have like a, 10-minute frequency. That means that we're going to have buses coming like every 10 minutes from like downtown all the way down to like FIU. And if you can implement dedicated bus lanes on that corridor, especially where there's like a lot of congestion, it's going to help your buses move super fast. And a similar thing happens on Biscayne, which where, we have a ton of buses going from like downtown to Aventura, or even like to the beach. Like these are corridors that a lot of people utilize, like not just to go to work, but like for any type of service, right? Like if you want to go to the mall, if you want to go to the doctor, like these really are like huge arteries in our system.
And what's the current frequency, just for our listeners to understand what the improvement would be?
Yeah, so I have to check on like the specific frequencies, and if folks want to check it out, you can visit betterbusproject.miami. But right now, depending on the time of day, you could have buses on both like Biscayne and Flagler that come like every 20 minutes. Okay. Like there are some like really good buses that like go from downtown to like Miami Beach, that have like, like 15-20 minutes depending on the time of day. But there is no like, frequent bus system all day. That doesn't exist. It's still pretty much stuck to like, like the peak hours that have like great service. And that's something that we really want to do with the Better Bus Project, just like have an all-day network that is frequent. And the more that we do that, the more that people are going to actually see how useful our system could be. Because let's say that you like get out of work and it's like 2 p.m. and you're like, okay, so when's the bus coming? Or even if you're a student, like think about it, you get out of like Wolfson and like, okay, I have to go back to Kendall. Like, how am I going to do that? Like, you're not going to wait an hour, right? And that hour is costly. Like, just think about it. Because if you see that you can't take a bus, you're like, well, maybe I do have to get a car, because how else am I going to get home, right? And those things add up, and it's something that can be really harmful if like you're like a low wage worker, even if you don't have a job, right? So that's something that fixing the bus system is not just a transportation issue, right? Like this is an economic issue, like it's a climate issue, it's everything. So
it really is. I was when I was looking through your information on Transit Alliance, I was seeing how it costs $12,000 a year to own a car, which especially during this economic recession, it's a big, it's not a drop in the bucket for many people. It's a lot of money, and that's why there are so many people dependent on public transportation, because they truly cannot afford a car, and that's just $12,000, I believe, on maintenance. Forget about like having to.
I mean, just like think about it. Like if you have to buy a car, then you have to, it's insurance, it's gas, the tolls, it's the parking. These are things that add up. And if you're making minimum wage and you have to get a car and you work in a hotel that maybe doesn't have any type of clientele right now, and you lose your job, what are you going to do, right? Like, fixing the system is really like, it's to bring more relief to everybody, right? And especially people that, don't have like, just like 2 cars at their disposal and have like, just extra income that they can use for like a variety of things. And I think that's a really important, it's really important just, for the county to realize that getting folks on transit is not just for people that currently drive. It's to make it better for the people that currently use it, right? And this is something that we talked about at Transit Alliance, but I don't know if you've seen like the Metro cards, the transit cards rather. They have like a little slogan that says like drive less and then like live more. But it's like it's not just like, what if you don't have a car? Like, you're not driving less. Like, you're just like,
Not driving at all.
you're not driving. So like, I think it's really going to require like a huge like mentality shift to just, focus on the system, because we need the system to be better, not just on fixing the system so that less people use their cars. Right? Because like the focus has to be on making things work for everybody, right? Not just those that can afford to like pivot to the transit.
Yeah, and it's a good mentality to think, let's make this better for the current user. I mean, even in a business perspective, you're gonna first work with who your actual customer is, and then you're gonna move on and innovate to grab in new customers. But you always take care of your customer first.
Right, exactly.
And then the third step, the V, is the verify the smart plan with a full audit. So first, I think here we need to explain what the SMART plan is.
Yeah, so the SMART plan was officially launched back in 2016. It was something that our Transportation Planning Organization, or the TPO, launched. And I think I should just preface this by saying that, we have a lot of different like departments and like organizations that have a say in our transit. So we have the TPO, we have the Citizens Independent Transportation Trust, which is the CITT. We have the county commissioners that also like have a say in terms of our transit. We have like the state Department of Transportation. We have a lot of different bodies that have a say in our transit system. On top of the fact that we have 34 municipalities, more or less, that also, could have some control over what happens with their transit dollars. So back to the SMART plan. So in 2016, the TPO essentially decided that they were going to focus on, the strategic Miami area. The strategic Miami area, like I forget like the last two ones, but essentially it is like our plan for making mass transit happen in Miami-Dade County. And we have like a bunch of corridors. So you have the South, which just recently got like the BRT treatment, which is great because like, creating like a very efficient bus service down south is going to be super helpful. But then you have like, the North Corridor, then you have the East-West Corridor, you have the Beach Corridor. So like, and these are all things that if you have lived in Miami for over 30 years, you have already heard about them, because these are corridors that were supposed to get mass transit like in the 90s. Like in the 90s. I wasn't even born.
Yeah,
I was not even born.
Before we were even born.
I wasn't even in the United States. But so with the SMART plan, the county was like, all right, we're serious about this. We're going to do it. Turns out that in the last 4 years, what actually happened is that a lot of studies that are required, right, by like, the Department of Transportation, these studies have been administered, but we haven't actually gotten much from them. Like, we don't have like tangible transit relief that was promised in 2016. Like, we're still waiting for that. And so what we really want the CAVA administration to do is to run an audit of where we are now and where we're going. Because, for people that are even our age, like, we can't afford to wait like 30 more years for transit service. Like, we, are in the middle of like, not just a pandemic, but a budget crisis, right? That is going to hit Miami like extremely hard, just given how much we depend on tourism and on hospitality. So we really need to figure out how are we utilizing our money effectively. And a good way to do that is to see, a SMART plan is a project that costs billions of dollars. Where are we at with the corridors and what they set out to do? And we're really, we're very happy that Mayor Cava is on board with the plan, because we know that she is going to get serious about figuring out where the SMART plan is going. Because what we all know for a fact is that we can't wait like 20 to 30 more years for service. And, just verifying the plan with an audit is necessary. It's long overdue.
Right. And so my question to you is, once they audit this plan, is what do you expect them to do? Because I'm pretty sure, knowing this county and the history of our county, you're going to find that we're nowhere near where we need to be. So what happens then?
I think that, once the audit is complete, like that's going to present a huge opportunity to really, chart out a plan of how we move forward, right? Like we've seen that we can really utilize like many parts of our transit system to bring relief, right? Like we were just talking about dedicated bus lanes. We were talking about, a bus rapid transit system. Like there are more cost effective methods. It's just that, for many decades, we have only seen like trains and heavy rail as the way to get us there. But in fact, like there are just so many different varieties. And I haven't even talked to you about like biking and like walking, right? Which like turns out like people have been doing that for millennia. And yet we just haven't really invested in that. But we'll get to that, in the last pillar of the plan. But really, like I think that once you do an audit, like you're gonna realize that, if you have a budget crisis and you have massive need, you need a solution. Like we can't just say, okay, we're gonna bring heavy rail that's gonna cost like $1 billion in 20 years. Like in 20 years, we don't even know where Miami's gonna be. Like many things might have changed. What we can do right now is fix our current system to make it work for more people. And I'm actually very happy that, the county and the TPO is thinking of like, hey, like maybe we can do more bus service like more effectively, right? And a lot of people like get on transit lines because you're like, oh, you guys are the bus people, you guys only care about buses. But it's like, no, we care about a system that functions. And we know that there are solutions that may not be shiny, may not be glossy, they're not like, these fancy trains. We just know what works. And we think that, if more people can see the value in that, then we can definitely move forward.
It's a good thing to add that rails work, but reality is that they're extremely expensive.
It's very expensive. Like it's something that it has to be acknowledged that, a lot of Miami-Dade residents, especially residents that live like in North Dade and in South Dade, they were promised rail like in the early aughts, right? Like these were promises that politicians made, and they did not deliver. And so they have like every right to feel that they were, that they were robbed of like transportation promises. But nevertheless, like we need to figure out a way to like move forward from that, because we can't just keep betting on things that may not actually work for the most amount of residents. And that's why, we support any plan that actually delivers like true, like comprehensive service to people in Miami-Dade.
We need rail, but we also need the supplements, because the rail is going to get you so far, but like
right.
It's kind of like Amazon. Their logistics is, well, you're moving from a warehouse to warehouse in planes, but you're gonna need that delivery truck to go home to home. And in a way, the bus system, the bikes are basically that little truck
right,
move home to home. So yeah, very good point. So then the last point, segueing into the mobility of using walking, being able to bike, maybe even scooters, because that's now, before the pandemic, everyone was all around those. So this one is advancing reform of transit department to prioritize the pedestrians and the cyclists. So here we have to ask the question, and it's kind of a rhetorical question for most of us, but is there an issue with our leadership in our transportation departments?
So I think that's something that has happened not just in Miami-Dade, but in many counties and cities across the county, is that our roads have been prioritized over any other mode of not just transportation, of mobility. Like think about it, and I think this particularly hits home for a lot of like Miamians, but like our highways are always getting expanded, our streets are always getting wider. But yet, when you're walking outside and you're trying to go to like your local Publix, your sidewalks don't work. So how are people really expected to move from point A to point B, not in a car, if they don't have like viable sidewalks? And so, with this pillar, what we're really trying to do is figure out a way to prioritize pedestrians and cyclists in the transportation department itself, right? And with respect to leadership, the transit department has a very specific set of skills that they can utilize, right? They just need direction to really move forward with those plans. Because we work with a lot of great transportation professionals, and we know that there is an urgency to move these plans forward. They just need like the right support and the right vision to push those projects forward. Because right now, it's something that just has not been as prioritized as our roadways have been.
And so when you talk about the transportation department, are you just talking about the TPO, or are you talking about the whole conglomerate that you were talking about before?
No, so with this, we're specifically talking about the Department of Transportation and Public Works, which is, within like the Miami-Dade County kind of administration. And, the TPO can definitely have a say with regards to, the types of projects that they prioritize and the type of message that they really relay like to all the different municipalities. Because I would say that a lot of municipalities in Miami-Dade County could use significant investment in their sidewalks and in their bikeways, right? Like just like think about and I don't know if this is a concept that like your listeners are familiar with, but like the first and last mile like gap. That's like, for example, you don't know how you're gonna get to that first mile of transit, right? Like how are you gonna reach a bus that's like a mile away, right? And a lot of people do struggle with that, because if you don't have a car, how are you going to get to the busway? Like, are you going to walk? But if your sidewalk is, full of holes, how are you going to actually get there? So something that we really
don't even have a sidewalk.
Exactly. And that's a whole nother problem too, right? But this is something that, we really need to figure out how we're fixing the entire built environment, right? Because if we really want to be like a community that can, have a great transit system, we need to make sure that the ways that people have to access our transit are also built out. Because like we can't just continue relying on park and rides, right? Like people are going to drive to get on a bus or to get on a train. That's not really, a long-term solution, right? Like we need to make sure that people like can walk to places, right? Like every trip, even if you're just walking to your car, starts with you walking somewhere, right? Or even if you, are even if you have like like a disability, right? Like you need a sidewalk to roll to get to where you need to go, right? Like we need to think about like different people and like different needs, like not just again like through kind of like the tunnel vision of folks that are in a car. And we feel super strongly about that, I'm sure you can tell. But we really think that, especially because Mayor Cava has been so vocal about, the need to pedestrianize and make our county more bikeable, that she's really going to help push this forward.
Yeah, and I was reading in that same Miami New Times article that she herself and her family dealt with an accident of her husband getting injured.
Yeah.
So I can see how it's also personal to her, and it kind of motivator to move this ahead.
I was just reminded last week, one of the first items that the county commission actually voted on was a resolution that Commissioner Eileen Higgins put forward, which was basically, along the same veins of we need to figure out how we're going to reorganize the transit department to really focus on pedestrian and cycling initiatives, right? She's a commissioner that represents like the urban core, right? She oversees like Brickell, Little Havana, downtown, and parts of Miami Beach. And she herself is a transit rider and she walks a lot, So she understands that, this is an issue that like really needs to be prioritized, right? And I think that it should also be really encouraging for other commissioners to figure out how to make their own districts more walkable and bikeable. Because, we always have, a gripe with traffic, but we need to pivot and be like, okay, so how can we make sure that people have other options? Because like I'll tell you, like I can't sit here and be like, oh, hey, all these people like in their cars, because I'm like, what else are they gonna do? Most people don't have any other option. Like we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Like what do you like? I used to live in like when I was growing up, like I used to live in Kendall. Like I used to live in like West Kendall. Like when I was growing up, I was like, oh, I'm gonna have a car. Like I'm gonna get to school in a car. And the way that I'm gonna see my friends is I'm gonna get in a car. Like it never clicked to me that biking and walking were options. And like for my parents, that wasn't something that they were like, I see, go and walk. Like, of course not. Like, but that's why we need just like leadership to say, okay, I'm gonna make this community more walkable and bikeable because this is like what we need as a community. Like this, I'm gonna do this for my grandchildren. I'm gonna do this for my daughter. Like I'm gonna do this like for seniors. Like seniors are like one of the most active constituents in our county, and they want this, but we need to do better for all of us through that.
So I'm going to close off with this last question for you. This plan is for the first 100 days of the new administration with Daniela Levin Cava. So what do you expect to see after these 100 days? Like what's the vision?
So after these first 100 days, this is what we're calling our blueprint. Like this is what, past the first 100 days, we need to see these these actions implemented. And then once we get there, then we can really start to see, okay, now that we have an affirmative, what is the plan to get this done? Because something that I think Miami has really been kind of, a victim to is a lot of promises, but then a failure in, with respect to action. And making sure that we have, plans that people can actually say, in the next 5 years, we're going to have a fully built out urban bicycle network. And we're going to say, okay, cool. Now let's get to work and figure out how the community can make sure that they're involved in getting that done. So after the first 100 days and we get, our firm commitments and figure out like where we're going, then we can really get to work and figure out how everybody that's going to be affected by this can get on board with all of the plans. Because we know that, based on the work that we've done with the Better Bus Network, that the community really wants to be involved. Like everybody has something to say. It's just they have never been involved in the process. And it really starts with community engagement to move any project forward. That's why, even with like, one of the pandemic has been obviously like disastrous and really harmful. But within our county government, it has like unleashed a wave of like public participation through public comment. And that needs to continue. That needs to continue because people want to be heard. They just never had the opportunity to voice their concerns like they have in this year. And the reason why we did that is because we made everything more accessible. Right. And we just hope that, by making transportation decisions more accessible to the community, that we're actually going to get some change.
And talking about community, how can this community help support Transit Alliance and all the work that you guys are doing?
Well, one of the first things that you all can do is visit us at transitalliance.miami. On our page, you'll find that we have 2 chapters. One that is focused in the city of Miami, and we focus on, ways that people can get involved to advocate for more bikeable streets and more walkable neighborhoods. And we have a similar chapter in Miami Beach. And aside from that, we have a writers council of like transit writers from all across the county that are also advocating for better public transit. But other than that, we're very active on Twitter. You can find us at Transit MIA. And, we're always pushing for better systems to make sure that we can actually move Miami forward.
Thank you so much, Maria, for joining and for your time, for letting us know what's going on. And really, this plan seems like a great way to start. And honestly, in my own opinion, it just seems like finally we're at a point where all of the things that we've been hoping for as residents of this county, it's like, okay, we're right there. It's like we just need to just push ahead and we're going to get what we've all been crying out for, which is give me another alternative to my car.
Thank you. Thank you again for having me. It's been a pleasure to chat with you. We're having a transportation panel. It's called The Future of Public Transit, where we're actually going to have Mayor Levin Cava, Commissioner Higgins, and 2 state representatives just chat with us and let's figure out how are we going to get our transportation systems up and running.
This episode will actually launch on that same day, so I'll
perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. We can get everything. Oh, it's gonna be a transit week.
Yes, it's gonna be a transit day. So everyone, Wednesday, December 2nd, right? That's the date.
Yep.
We're getting a deep dive completely on transportation here locally, and I know we all we all want to hear it really, and we want to see it more than anything. So thank you so
Sounds
much
great.
for your time.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone, and thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next episode.